Hi, I'm Granny, and we're going down the rabbit hole of addiction and the brain. The early Egyptians believed the brain unimportant, and its only purpose was to keep the shape of the head. Early processes of mummification just threw the brain away, calling it skull offal, offal spelled Offal, meaning waste, folded cloth, little. Centuries later, around 1700 BC, attitudes had changed and Egyptians started valuing the brain, preserving it in the mummification process. Prior to the 20th century, drug addiction was understood to be an affliction caused by, quote, frailty of the will. Addicts simply suffered from moral weakness. This belief was undermined by the advent of brain research methods, which demonstrated that addiction is better understood as a disease. Dr. Bruce Alexander arrived at the disease model of addiction in the 1970s. He was born December 1939 and is a psychologist and professor emeritus from Vancouver, Canada. He has taught and conducted research on the psychology of addiction at Simon Fraser University in Vancouver since 1970. He retired from active teaching in 2005. Alexander and SFU colleagues from that university conducted a series of experiments into drug addiction known as the Rat Park experiments. The experiments involved placing rats in small cages with two water bottles, one with pure water and the other one with drug-laced water. Though the rats initially drank equally from both types of water, they progressively gravitated toward the drugged water, eventually drinking so much that they overdosed and died. Laboratories throughout the world have conducted similar experiments with the same results. This experiment led scientists to conclude that drugs contain physical elements which, much like disease, alter the structure of the rat's brain in a way that compromised their self-preservation instincts and led to self-destruction, and we see that in adults also. Candace Beebe Pert, P-E-R-T, a brilliant American neuroscientist and pharmacologist, discovered an amazing opioid receptor and cellular binding site for endorphins in the brain. She lived from June 1946 to September 2013. Her discoveries led to her writing the book Molecules of Emotion, the science behind mind-body medicine, and it was released in 1999, which explains why the brain behaves the way it does when drugs are introduced to the body. And she's written other things in addition to articles in science magazines, and really a fascinating person. In a Smithsonian magazine, September 1998, in that article, it states that, quote, she is widely regarded as the mother of a new field of science known as psychoneuroimmunology. Pert's research of brain biochemistry contributed to a new understanding of the mind and body, end quote. While I was reading her book, it was disturbing how often her and her ideas were ignored, and sometimes her ideas were stolen because I kind of assumed that she was in a woman in a man's field. Often is the case. Molecules of Emotion is a great read and radically altering how we view our brain and body, and I encourage anybody to read it. Fascinating. Pert explains, quote, for decades, most people thought of the brain and its extension, the central nervous system, as an electrical communication system resembling a telephone system with trillions of miles of intricately crisscrossing wires. The brain is a bag of hormones, end quote. Those are two different quotes from two different sources. New research studying peptides and receptors show that only 2% of neuronal communications are electrical across the synapse. It's mostly chemical. Synaptic signaling is primarily considered a chemical signaling, as most synapses in the body uses chemicals as messengers called neurotransmitters to transmit signals between neurons rather than direct electrical contact. This means an electrical impulse triggers the release of chemicals, the chemical messengers, across the synaptic cleft to reach the receiving neuron. The primary way the neurons communicate at synapses is through the release of neurotransmitters, chemicals, which are chemical molecules. The drug overdose crisis began 40 years ago, driven by heroin and crack and cocaine use. In the 1990s, it shifted to prescription opioids due to widespread overprescribing of opioid medicines for pain relief. Some sources that I came across believe that drug companies were able to make stronger, more addicting drugs by understanding Candace Pert's research. That's curious. Her research and its complications is a reminder that new information is not always accepted, as in the case for her, and rarely it is, for a variety of reasons, accepted, even though other laboratories conducted experiments coming to the same conclusion. This is another reminder of how easily information knowledge can be gained and lost, sometimes forever. Just like the experiments with the rats led scientists to conclude that drugs contain physical elements which, much like disease, altered the structure of the rats' brains in a way that compromised self-preservation instincts and led to self-destruction. Is it possible for behaviors aside from drugs to do the same things? And I kind of think so. If we behave a certain way long enough, I kind of imagine it's like developing grooves in the brain. If you've ever been on a track and your tires are in each one and there's sides on each, and it's really hard to get out of that track. Can our thoughts do something similar? This is why I encourage each of us to regularly take our emotional temperature to ensure we're going in the best direction for our lives, in the right direction. By understanding our brains, our lives, the world, we can live the best possible lives. Remember, be kind to yourself. Healthy self-care is not selfish. Thanks for joining me, spending this time with me. Please join me again when Granny goes down the rabbit hole. Please subscribe and share. Thank you.